Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning, whenever you're seeing this. Hopefully, my overly happy face does not drive you crazy and mad. To start off today, this is kind of last part of section 3.1. We're talking about biomes. There are a couple things I wanted to clear up before we do kind of move on to the second section of it. Kind of speaking on that, I wanted to really speak on the difference between deciduous forests and coniferous forests. Those are kind of key to understanding the two different biomes. First off, deciduous really means that these are type of trees that grow these broad leaf type plants. They tend to have oak trees or other trees of that nature, elm trees, trees with bigger kind of leaves. That do die and you fall off during winter season. So do know that's what that refers to when we're talking about deciduous forests. So they're mainly forests with trees that have the bigger leaves, not huge like rainforest, but big leaves that then die and fall off during winter. That's key. Then the other is it kind of goes to a boreal forest with coniferous trees. I skipped a slide too much there. But these type of not this one. Sorry, guys. Need to make sure I get the right one here. But boreal forests and even going up more north, and started getting into tundra, if they do have trees, tend to be coniferous trees, which tend to be those needled type of leaf systems on them. So just think of pine trees. I know I didn't actually state the name of them, so I just want to make sure that we're all clear there. Okay. Another point I really want to make up to understand climate graphs. For all these, the biggest kind of thing to know is what boreal forest, what is the temperature like and what's the precipitation like? Hint, that's what might pop up on the quiz, right? It might state something, even the AP exam will state, this type of biome has, year-long high temperatures, but very low, precipitation rates. So you should be able to discern which kind of biome is that in regards to that information. Okay. Wow, I'm not making sense. That vaccine really messed me up. But I just kind of want to clear those two things up and do know them for kind of, ongoing through this process. So remember, all depends on temperature and precipitation. You start changing those two, it changes the whole biome. So those are key. Understanding what type of biome gets which of those and how they are in each biome is important to understanding this unit. Okay. Now we're kind of going on, so we kind of know the land biomes. Do know this virtual biome. You don't actually have to go to it, and unfortunately the link doesn't work anymore, but we will be going on to and doing a part of this lab on when you guys get back, so no stress there. Okay. But we're going to kind of talk about marine ecosystems on this last part, and it's key to understanding where life is. So when it comes to biomes on land, as I stated repeatedly in the other lecture, that the main one we're going to talk about is what? Rainforest. That's the main one. We are going to talk about a little bit about all of them, but rainforests are the key one. You should know why. Why is that important to environmental science? I think I said it in the other one, but it's because all the life is there, right? That is where the majority of the complex biosystems exist. The reason being, good constant temperature, high amount of precipitation. With those two type of abiotic processes going on, it really it can support a lot of life. You have a lot of explosion of plant growth. Then if you have explosion of plant growth, you have life growth. Now think about that when it comes to marine ecosystems. It follows kind of the same key. If it's a zone that has a lot of light, and of course it's in the water, so that most marine ecosystems have enough precipitation in a manner of speaking, but temperature is key. So when you're getting more light, maybe type of warmer type systems, you tend to have more of the life. So we're going to talk about those a little bit today. That's what's key. Okay. First off, oceans cover 3/4 of Earth's surface, right? And then really we have vast amounts. We often think of as forests as being where the photosynthesis occurs, where we get all of our oxygen. Not so true. Photosynthesis is carried out by algae or free-floating plants, phytoplankton, in the oceans. Actually, greatest amount of photosynthesis near the coast where nutrients wash in. So do know that phytoplankton is probably, it was kind of the last study I read, it gives off just as much oxygen, if not more, than all the planet's forests do. So do know phytoplankton is very, very key and important to humans. And kind of what's the key here is, I told you you need a lot amount of sunlight for the ocean to create these environments, but also this kind of adds another part where you have the flow of nutrients from the land. So, just think of all this dead stuff on the land, decaying trees, decaying animals, people, whatever. It all gets washed down through those river systems, and then when it comes out of the river, you have all this beautiful nutrients. And then if gets a lot of nice sunlight, you have lots of plants there. And when you have a lot of plants, you have a lot of diversity in animal life as well. So it's key to understanding where life is in the oceans. It's not evenly distributed throughout the whole ocean system. It's based in certain areas more than others. Keep that in mind throughout this. Marine ecosystems also go by vertical stratification is a key feature here. Meaning, what does that mean? It kind of goes with altitude. We talked about altitude and how, the more further north you go, right? It's called altitude, right? The higher altitude you have, the less life there is. This is the exact opposite of altitude, where you have most of the life kind of exists near where the sun reaches, right? Where the sun is hitting the water. That's where you're getting most of the life. As you go down, well, it gets darker and darker and darker because those water molecules actually reflect light back up. So deep, deep, deep ocean, you don't have any light. It's pitch black down there. So keep that in mind. Where there's no light, there's no life, or a lot less life, I should say. Light and temperature decrease with the depth, and deep ocean species often grow very slowly. We kind of talked about this in the desert, right? Desert plants and animals tend to be very old, or they take a long time to grow because they just get, they don't have as much nutrients. Here, it's kind of the same thing. They don't get nutrients, but not enough light. So these are species that, there's a lot less few of them, but they grow much more slowly. Okay, so keep that in mind when we're kind of going through this as well. Key. So vertical stratification. Sorry, I had to push pause there. But vertical stratification is a key part of it, right? You need areas that have more light. If you don't have a whole lot of light, well, then you're not going to have a lot of growth of plant life or phytoplankton. Right? But there is also another caveat to that. Cold water tends to hold more oxygen. So when you have more oxygen in the water, organisms such as fish types and maybe larger type of mammals can survive. Well, not mammals, but larger types of fish can actually live in cold environments because it can actually hold a lot of more oxygen. So you kind of need a little bit of both. Now that's not saying, as we're going to find out, a lot of the zones around the equator, because it's warmer, has less oxygen, but you just have kind of that sunlight which increases that rate of growth. But if it's warm water near where there's an area with less light would tend to have less type of species. So I hope I'm not confusing there. You might need to rewind that to kind of re-stress to get that straight. But to kind of talk about, right, you mainly need light. The more light you have more growth of species. Those are the most versatile areas. But it doesn't mean like in the North and South Pole that there is not life due to the high amount of oxygen in those regions because it's colder tends to support life as well. So you kind of have a both zone. Now, ocean systems are classified as kind of these areas that have these low growing type of organisms or less light at the bottom of the ocean are called the benthic or hadal, the bottom of the ocean. Do know that is where life overall, even though it's very cold down there, it's just not getting enough light. So you tend to have these species they do exist because they have oxygen down there. But then on the other hand, there's just not a whole lot of plant life. And if there's not a whole lot of plant life, there's not a whole lot of growth. Think about the opposite, right? Think about where coral reefs are located, kind of in the equatorial zone, and they tend to be on the, you never see coral reefs deep down in the ocean. You see them near these areas where they can receive lots of sunlight. That's kind of proving that point. And then another kind of key thing to remember here, vocabulary, is area near shore is known as the littoral zone. That is kind of the area around land. Now you're going to have a lot of life around land as well. Why? Because you're getting all that nutrients into the ocean. So it's kind of key factors to kind of remember here. The biggest things being the more sunlight you get, the more life you're going to have. But also when it's closer to the shore, it's called the littoral zone, and that gets a lot of life because then you have a lot of nutrients. Which then if you have a lot of sun, it's kind of like the rainforest of the ocean environment, coral reefs, and we'll talk about that in a couple slides. So here's the zones of the ocean. What do you have to kind of remember here? The key vocab I would say for environmental science is the littoral or intertidal zone. This area that is along, pointing in the wrong area, but this area that's along the shore. You're just going to get more life along the shore because you have all this nutrients flowing into the ocean. Also, just know, like looking at this map right here, you're going to get a lot of kind of life along maybe the shelf kind of area, the continental shelf, because it's getting light. The light from the sun is able to penetrate into that water and go down there. On the opposite hand, light is not making its way all the way down to the Hadal zone or benthic zone in regards to ocean. So it's tend to be cold, so you can support large life. That's why we have large types of squid down there and many different other organisms, but they tend to be large and bulky because there is so much more oxygen down there. But there's just not a whole lot of support systems to feed these animals. So I would definitely kind of know the littoral zone near the shore, but also just know we'll talk about the Hadal zone as well. Okay. Surface to Hadal zone communities. So this is kind of talking about communities that go from the very surface down all the way down to the Hadal zone. Open ocean is a biological desert, except for areas where nutrients are distributed by currents. Sargasso Sea in the Atlantic is an example of it. But what this is really saying is, when you think of the deep ocean, or if you think of the center of the Pacific, as long as it's not by an island, those tend to be dead zones. You don't see a whole lot of life there because there is no nutrient system. There's nothing to get it started, right? Most of the life is surrounded by the shores of the world, right? Around the definite large continental zones or islands even. But you have life around those areas, not deep ocean. It's just there's nothing to support life there, no nutrients. And then the deepest layer of the ocean, the Hadal zone, contains communities of tube worms, mussels, and supported by microbes that capture the chemical energy from thermal vents on the ocean floor. That's kind of a side point. We'll kind of speak on that a bit. This is just really stressing that the Hadal zone does have life. It has very unique life. But these organisms, the reason why they can survive there with no light is because they get support from thermal vents that are coming up from the core of the Earth. We won't talk about them much in environmental science. I won't speak on them too much, but do know that there is some life that does exist, and it doesn't require the sun to exist on this planet. Coastal zones, by far the most important in environmental science anyway. Communities vary with depth, light, temperature, and nutrient concentration, right? They have all those kind of things going on, especially near the equator. Coral reefs are aggregations of coral polyps that live symbiotically with algae. Their calcium-rich skeletons build up the reef. Really have just the symbiosis of organisms that exist in this area, and then they live off each other and you cohabitate. And light must penetrate for algae photosynthesis, right? So these zones, you never see coral reefs in kind of northern or very southern climates because they need this kind of warm temperature as well as a constant amount of sunlight. But as we're kind of getting here, and which we're going to kind of talk about more further on in our units, is coral reefs are also the most threatened. Why? Because think about it. They live in these equatorial zones where it tends to be a lot of people live as well. Thailand is near that area, the equatorial zone, and in the Southeast Asia region. But also, since there's so much people, you have so much pollution and trash that goes into the water. Pollution from chemicals, which ends up causing a thing called coral bleaching, in which corals expel their algae partners and then they tend to die off. because it doesn't meet the right chemical composition for them. I mean, we'll talk about that in global warming as well, because the ocean is actually becoming more CO2 enriched, which then just does not support life for coral reefs. 1/3 of coral reefs have already been destroyed, and 90% of the remaining reefs will be critically endangered or dead by 2030, in regards to latest studies, and will be critically endangered by 2050. Just think about that. 90% of the remaining reefs will be critically endangered or dead by 2030. That is in just what, 8 to 9 years. So it's speeding quite rapidly, unfortunately. Mangroves are also very important. So when we're talking about environmental science, I do want to stress about these ecosystems of biomes that are most important environmental science. And I am in no way saying that coral reefs are more important than mollusks that live down in the Haddle zone. I'm not. It's just environmental science, we try to really protect areas that have the most types of biodiverse life, because when you start breaking down biodiversity, the whole system collapses. So you want to protect those areas first and foremost. So we're really talking about those areas. So coral reefs being one, mangroves being the next. Mangroves are trees that grow in saltwater along tropical coastlines. We have tons of these in Thailand, and they are super, super vital. First off, they help stabilize shoreline, meaning what happens when you have an earthquake or storm floods that come up and wash, if you don't have mangroves, it washes away the soil or destroys cities. Mangroves actually provide a barrier between them. They're great nurseries for fish and shrimp. Many shrimp and fish actually have their babies in mangroves. If you get rid of the mangroves, they can no longer reproduce. And then they can also be cut down for timber, for production value as well. So mangroves are highly important. We also have tidal environments, estuaries and salt marshes. Estuaries are bays or semi-enclosed bodies of brackish water that form where rivers enter the ocean. And brackish just really means it's a mixture of fresh and salt water. And this is where kind of they meet. And there are certain species that kind of require these both systems or a mixture of them to support life. We also have salt marshes, coastal wetlands flooded regularly or occasionally by seawater. So it's some parts of the year it's just dry land or kind of a freshwater environment, but then ocean water does come up at high tides and floods these areas. That's what salt marshes are. Both of these are nutrient rich and biologically diverse, and 2/3 of marine fish and shellfish rely on estuaries for spawning and development. So these are required areas to have certain animals as well, because they use them as nurseries. And there's other freshwater. There's then, kind of going away from the ocean to saltwater type environments to freshwater ecosystems. We have lakes, obviously, and rivers. Freshwater lakes have distinct vertical zones. I can never say this ever. Plimion, a warm upper layer. To be honest, I don't see it too much in AP environmental science anymore, so I don't think you have to really stress about this, but watch, this will be the year. The hypo one as well, cold, deeper layer that does not mix. So these are just different layers of lake systems is really what we're talking about. Ones that are, there's a system that's warmer near the top of the lake, and then we have the deeper parts which it gets colder because you just have less sunlight. And then we have thermocline, distinct temperature transition zones that separate warm upper layers and deeper cold layers. For the bottom of the lake systems, we call them benthos, or the bottom of a lake system. Okay, and here it is kind of just showing you these zones in lakes. And once again, I do want to stress it. Look at this. We have the littoral zone as well on lakes. Even if they're smaller than oceans, we still have them. And most life on lakes even exists in this littoral zone. So another key point there. And this is just kind of showing you kind of a terrestrial ecosystem influences on a lake. So I just kind of wanted to stress this, or at least kind of to show you these systems in play in these type of areas. But just know, we have sun's energy, heat and light. We have heat that dissipates. We have inorganic material going in and organic material going in. Agricultural processes. We'll talk about this in our water pollution unit. We'll talk about agriculture and how that's changing lake systems. But just do know that, once again, you have most of the life when it comes to lake. Most of life is in this littoral zone by the shore, but also at the top because it receives most of the sunlight. And there is life at the bottom. It's because all the dead things end up sedimenting down there, and then we have organisms that live off the bottom and kind of eat the dead organic material, just like the ocean, but on a smaller scale. And then we have wetlands. We can talk about those. These are freshwater ecosystems. Land surface is saturated or covered with water, at least partly. These include swamps, marshes, bogs, and fens. Swamps are wetlands with trees. Marshes are wetlands without trees. Bogs and fens are waterlogged soils that tend to accumulate peat. Bogs fed by precipitation, while fens are fed from groundwater, nutrient poor with low productivity, but many unusual species. Guys, I'm gonna be honest. When it comes to understanding each of these, just understand like the main ones, like estuaries, right? Understand mangroves, and you can kind of put all the swamps, marshes, bogs, and fens into the wetlands category. I've never seen a question where it really breaks these down, and I'm not going to do that to you as well. So you can kind of skip past this. Just understand what wetlands are. It's a freshwater ecosystem, that sometimes has trees, which are swamps, sometimes doesn't. But these are very vital water systems, freshwater systems on our planet that do house life. Okay, water is usually shallow enough to allow full sunlight, so you get a lot of different growth in there because it is receiving so much sunlight. These tend to be really good wetlands. The key to understanding wetlands is they are absolutely essential for the stop of pollution. I think that's the next slide. Yes, it's first off, wetlands tend to be one of the most biologically diverse of the freshwater environments. They're breeding grounds for birds, make up only less than 5% of land area, but contain 33% of endangered species. So these are small, compact little areas on land that have fresh water that have a lot of different life on them. And one of the greatest areas of concern for biologists, because why? Humans tend to want to live on wetlands, and they, gradually we convert them to terrestrial communities through secession. We really change them over. And just here's some different examples of wetlands. As you can see, marshes, swamps, coastal salt marshes kind of fit in that category as well. But it's key to know here. Did it not say? Oh yeah, here we kind of get into it here. But wetlands are essential. I'm going to kind of just really stress the main point is wetlands are essential because they also provide not only just tons of life, biodiversity on land, but they also act as a pollutant neutralizer. These areas tend to filter out all these pollutants, hold on to it, and then allow fresh water to go through these systems because you just have so much mud and dirt and sand that really kind of cleans out the water. So they're very, very vital to humans as well. Conservation of habitat to humans use is the single largest cause of biodiversity loss. Temperate deciduous forests are the most completely human-dominated biome. I guess this kind of gets into a different one, but humans tend to want to live in these kind of areas where we have wetlands, but also temperate deciduous forests tend to be the most human-dominated. Why? They are just the most easy for human life. They tend to not be too hot and too cold. So we tend to want to live in these zones. There's not a whole lot of humans that live in tundra or Arctic deserts. Even deserts, I guess are more human dominated than the tundra is, but we still see less life in deserts than we do see in these temperate deciduous forest regions. And about half of all original wetlands in the U.S. have been degraded over the past 250 years. Why? Because people want to live on them. They make good environments. They tend to be kind of that perfect temperate zone as well as precipitation zone that humans like. So a lot of our cities in the United States are based in wetlands. Same thing with China. China has a lot of their cities on these wetland zones. Bangkok fits on a wetland zone. The Chao Phraya kind of runs into it. Bangkok is on top of it because it has so much water and just life. And just think about it. When you had founding fathers of any country, they tend to put cities where they have access to a lot of food, and that tends to be wetlands. And here's just kind of a map that distributes it or shows this. How we use, where these type of environments are. So just kind of another look at that, to kind of stress. Um, this is just a great graphic on showing you how humans have disturbed different types of environments. You don't have to read through all this, but this just kind of restresses the whole point that temperate areas tend to be most human dominated. Most of it tends to be, human dominated. So of what this is really saying is temperate broadleaf forests are now 81% of temperate broadleaf forests are now covered with human areas, manufacturing, living, agriculture. Then the next one would be chaparral, which is kind of a grassland type savanna, chaparral, sorry. But that's 67.8. So 67.8 of all chaparral environments are now human dominated. And we can kind of go down that list where tundra and Arctic, we only about 1.3 or 0.3% is human dominated. So it's very untouched. But as we're going to learn, that area is suffering as well due to global climate change. So we're messing everything up. All right. Okay, guys, that is it. Hopefully I didn't confuse you too much. Just know though, what it kind of comes back down to is when it comes to water environments that the keys I want to really remind you of, understand what maybe what the zone names are, at least a literal environment, right? Next to the shore, but also the Haddle zones in the bottom, or it's called benthic in ponds and lakes. Do know that they support the most life because you have a lot of sunlight that's near the Jeez, I'm at a loss of words. You're at near the areas which gets the most sunlight. Sorry, guys, it's one of those days. But that's key to understanding these environments. But also know that freshwater areas. I would definitely understand what estuaries are and salt marshes, or estuaries and marshes are as well. And swamps, those type of wetland environments, because those are where it supports most of the life as well. Okay, all right. I'm going to turn off my voice because obviously I can't talk on this one. Hopefully, you guys kind of understood this one. If you guys have any questions, please don't feel scared to ask questions in class. I think it helps out everybody. So please bring them up to me whenever you can. If something just doesn't quite make sense, and I will explain them maybe in a better way in class time. Okay. All right. Take care, guys. I'm always here. Have a good week off. Enjoy life.